It began on a Tuesday morning when I found the letter. Not just any letter, a certified, official HOA violation notice printed on Margaret Henderson's personal letterhead. Because apparently, being HOA president meant she could rebrand municipal. Warnings like a corporate memo, immediate violation, inappropriate professional attire in residential setting. I read it 3 times, convinced it was a joke. According to Margaret's twisted interpretation of our neighborhood bylaws, my daily routine of leaving for work in business suits was creating an atmosphere of intimidation and elitism that disrupts the community's casual, family-friendly environment. The woman had actually written a legal document about my clothes. I knocked on her door that evening, still wearing the charcoal gray suit that had apparently offended her delicate sensibilities. Margaret opened the door like she'd been expecting me, which, knowing her surveillance habits, she probably had. "Oh, it's the neighborhood CEO," she said, her voice dripping with enough sarcasm to fill a swimming pool. "Come to intimidate more residents with your corporate uniform." Margaret Henderson was what happened when someone gave a middle-aged woman with too much time and to little purpose a tiny amount of authority. She stood there in her floral housecoat, arms crossed, looking like she'd been elected supreme ruler of suburbia instead of just HOA president. "Margaret, I'm an accountant. I wear suits to work. That's fairly normal." Normal. She laughed like I'd told her the earth was flat. "Nothing about parading around here like you own the place is normal. You're making other residents feel inadequate." I blinked, slowly, making them feel inadequate. "By wearing professional clothing. Don't play dumb. You know exactly what you're doing." The woman was completely serious. In her mind, my morning routine of walking to my car in business attire was some kind of psychological warfare against the neighborhood. That night, I did what any rational person would do. I researched our actual HOA bylaws, all 47 pages of them, twice. Nowhere, and I mean nowhere, did it mention dress codes for residents. The closest thing was a clause about appropriate attire for HOA meetings, which basically meant no swimwear or offensive t-shirts. I called the HOA board. All 5 members laughed when I explained the situation. Apparently, Margaret had been creative with her interpretation of community standards before. "Just ignore her," said board member Tom Peterson. "She can't actually enforce that." I should have listened to Tom. The escalation began 2 weeks later. I was watering my front lawn before work in a navy blue suit. Naturally, when Margaret materialized like a suburban apparition, she marched across the street with the determination of someone about to solve world hunger. I thought I made myself clear. She announced loud enough for the entire block to hear. "The dress code violation stands." "Margaret, there is no dress code." I checked. "I don't care what you checked. I'm the HOA president, and I say there's a dress code." The woman had appointed herself judge, jury, and fashion police. She stood there in her bathrobe and fuzzy slippers, lecturing me about appropriate attire. "You're being ridiculous," I said, turning back to my sprinkler. "Ridiculous." Her voice climbed 3 octaves. "Ridiculous. You think you can just waltz around here in your fancy suits, making everyone else look like peasants." That's when I realized this wasn't about dress codes. This was about control. Margaret Henderson was a woman who'd spent her entire life being overlooked, and now she had a clipboard and a title. She was going to use both like weapons. "I'm wearing clothes, Margaret, legal clothes, to my job, like a normal person. Normal people don't dress like they're running Fortune 500 companies when they're just doing basic accounting." The way she said basic accounting made it sound like I was claiming to be a brain surgeon. Over the next month, Margaret's campaign intensified. She started timing her yard work to coincide with my departure for work. She'd stand there, garden hose in hand, making loud comments about people who think they're better than everyone else. Then came the letters. Not just to me, to everyone. Margaret had decided to educate the entire neighborhood about my elitist behavior. She sent detailed analyses of my wardrobe choices, complete with photos she'd taken from her front window. The neighbors started calling me, not to complain, to apologize for Margaret's insanity and ask if I needed help dealing with her. "She's completely lost it," said Mrs. Chen from next door. "She cornered me at the mailbox yesterday and gave me a 20-minute lecture about how your tie clip is a symbol of capitalist oppression. I wish I was exaggerating. The final straw came on a Friday morning in October. I was walking to my car, coffee in one hand, briefcase in the other, when Margaret emerged from behind her rose bushes like a deranged garden gnome. She was carrying a spray bottle. That's it," she screamed. "I've had enough of your corporate intimidation." Before I could process what was happening, she raised the bottle and sprayed me. The liquid hit my suit jacket and immediately started bleaching the fabric. White spots bloomed across the navy blue wool like toxic flowers. "Stop dressing like a CEO," she shrieked, continuing to spray. "You're just an accountant." I stood there, dripping with bleach, watching a grown woman have a complete meltdown over my work clothes. "Margaret, you just destroyed a $400 suit." "Good. Maybe now you'll dress like a normal person." That's when I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Say that again, Margaret." For the camera, her face went white, whiter than the bleach spots on my jacket. I was just ... You can single quotes T ... I can't what? Document you assaulting me and destroying my property." The woman who'd been so confident 3 seconds earlier suddenly looked like she'd swallowed a live fish. "Delete that," she whispered. "Delete what?" "The evidence of you committing multiple crimes." Margaret Henderson, HOA president and self-appointed fashion police, had just handed me everything I needed to destroy her. I drove to work in my bleach-stained suit, called my lawyer, and filed a police report. Then I did something Margaret never expected. I requested an emergency HOA board meeting. The meeting was held the following Tuesday. Margaret sat at the head of the table, trying to look authoritative, while 5 board members stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "Margaret," said board member Linda Stewart, "we've reviewed the incident report and the video. What exactly were you thinking?" "I was enforcing community standards," Margaret replied, her voice smaller than usual, "by assaulting a resident with bleach." "It wasn't assault. It was community intervention." The silence in that room was deafening. That's when I dropped my bombshell. "Actually, Margaret, I have something else to share." I pulled out a folder I'd been keeping for months. "I've been documenting your behavior. Every violation of your HOA presidency duties. Every harassment incident. Every abuse of power." Margaret's face drained of color. "Including," I continued, "the fact that you've been using HOA funds to print personal letterhead, conducting unauthorized surveillance of residents, and my personal favorite, the 17 noise complaints filed against you for screaming about my clothing at 7 a.m. I placed the folder on the table. "I also have signed statements from 14 neighbors about your harassment campaign. Would you like me to read them aloud?" Margaret Henderson, the woman who terrorized an entire neighborhood over a navy blue suit, looked like she was about to faint. "The police report has already been filed," I said calmly. "Criminal charges are pending. But I thought the board should know you've been violating your oath of office for months." The emergency vote was unanimous. Margaret Henderson was removed as HOA president immediately. 3 days later, she was arrested in her own driveway. The charges: assault, destruction of property, harassment, and misuse of HOA funds. I watched from my front yard, sipping coffee and wearing my favorite suit, the one she'd failed to destroy. The replacement had cost her $800 in damages, plus legal fees. As the police car pulled away, I couldn't help but smile. Margaret Henderson had declared war on professional attire and lost spectacularly. The neighborhood has been blissfully quiet ever since, and I still wear suits to work every single day. Some battles are worth winning in style.